It's been 43 years since the black South African youth defied and threatened the system of apartheid. The youth of 1976 took to the streets in protest against Bantu Education and the injustice of apartheid. So as the country heads to the elections on May 8, it is important to look for inspiration and lessons learned. We're joined now by Lebohang Maile, head of the ANC's Gauteng elections campaign. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Perhaps let me just start at the manner in which the ANC describes itself as a party, and that is of a liberation struggle movement in spirit and in character. What is your point of view? Has there been enough youth leadership in liberation struggle movements across Africa?
Evening, and thanks for having me. If you look at liberation movements like the ANC, you look at SWAPO in Namibia, you look at ZANU-PF, and many others. They've got a long history, they've got traditions in terms of how they're doing things. It's not like an organization that is new without any traditions or any culture. And that's why in the ANC, for instance, we speak of a generational mix, because we appreciate that an organization as old as the ANC must appreciate the fact that there is institutional memory. There is a lot of wisdom from the older generation, but at the same time, organizations must adapt or die.
And
That's
I want to
what,
talk about
President
that,
Peter
the
once
need
said.
for contemporary representation. If you look at some of the youth structures that you spoke about, the ANC, the African People's Organization, the Transvaal and Indian Congresses, most of those leaders were in their 20s when they took over the helm of the organization. Why is there so little representation of that now in some of these former liberation struggle movements, and namely the oldest, the ANC?
Yeah, well, that's why I'm talking about a generational mix, because if you look at the ANC, for instance, it's a multi-class, multi-sectoral, multicultural organization. You've got people who are young, who are old, you've got women, you've got men, you've got, it's a non-racial organization. So the leadership structures of the ANC must reflect its character, and not just the ANC, like I've said, all organizations, because if you don't reflect the character of your organization and of society, you become irrelevant.
Fair enough, and it speaks to relevance, it speaks to efficacy, and I'm sure, as you can see behind us, some of the visuals there, that belying the youth condition now, that is the hashtag FISMA movement.
And they're fallen.
Fallen, or whichever way you want to describe it. But is it really thanks to the ANC? Because there are those who say you presided over the movement where young people had to become so frustrated that they had to resort to violent means. The fact that the ANC, as a liberation struggle movement, 1976, the youth were at the forefront, all fighting for education. Why did it have to come to that?
Well, remember that, firstly, that FISMA Fall movement was predominantly led by ANC-aligned student organization, SASCO, the ANC Youth League and the YCL. And of course, it was a call that was adhered to by students in their large majority, because they are affected.
Some of whom would disagree with the statement that you're making now, that it wasn't largely ANC, that it was actually not partisan.
No, it was not partisan, but remember, and I don't want to get into the names, you can name Tebo, you can name all the leaders who are there, but those were prominent. Nompendulo, I mean, it is accepted that they led and they were in the forefront of that struggle. But for me, it's not about who was leading the struggle, but it's about the cause of that struggle. And we embraced it as the ANC, and we ultimately declared, as you know by now, that there's free tertiary education for students in a certain who fall within a certain category from poor families. And by the way, remember in the Freedom Charter, we have said the doors of learning must be open to all. We have always said as the ANC, and even ANC-aligned student organizations like COSAS, like SASCO, have always called for free education. So that's why I'm saying thanks to the ANC, because that's what we've always preached. But at some point, we were able to say there are a lot of competing priorities, as you know, and there were limited resources, and we could not implement it in '94, for instance, not because we did not believe in it. And even before we pronounced free tertiary education, we had already, without even declaring, we had already started providing free education in primary and secondary high schools. I mean, if I was to give you figures, for instance, in Gauteng, even before we pronounced or declared, we were already having what we call no-fee schools, and we're also providing a whole range of
okay, so
packages.
I don't want us to haggle over the facts of this, because as I said, there'll be those who disagree with it. But the important thing is to ask whether or not, as the youth league of the ANC, are you reactionary, or are you leading the way in terms of defining this transformation, this transformative architecture that is the new South Africa? There are those who say just even calling some of the people who are part or disgruntled born frees is being unfair to them, because the systemic challenges are still there.
Well, unfortunately, I'm no longer in the youth league, and I wish I was still there.
But as a young leader in a liberation struggle movement.
Yes, I think, firstly, it's important to have an organizational expression in the form of ANC Youth League. You will know the role that the ANC Youth League played in the struggle, even post 1994. And it is said that we have a youth league that is not as strong as supposed to be, because organization is very important for any sector of society, because it actually begins to rally people or that specific sector behind a specific agenda. And I think one of the weaknesses for the youth sector, it's that lack of organizational strength, lack of pronounced activism, because we all know that young people are facing a whole range of challenges. Unemployment, some of them are living in abject poverty, others are graduates and they can't find jobs and all that. And that lack of organizational expression, I think it doesn't help the cause.
Is it lack of organizational expression or lack of participatory democracy? And some say this is the criticism of liberation struggle movements, because there's a lack of genuine expression of that. The structures don't allow for that to occur.
Well, participation must not be limited to politics only. I think it would be unfair to say that if you don't have strong political youth organizations, it means young people are not participating. I mean, young people are active in church, young people are active in cultural organizations, they are active in NGOs and all that. And the weakness, as I've said, in the political arena is that youth organizations are not as strong as they used to be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that young people are not participating.
So how do you ensure power sharing and accountability, because not all of them are going to have the same political allegiance?
Power sharing
and accountability. As a young leader as yourself, because some of the challenges are as a result of what is wrong with the system, what is wrong with the politics, what is wrong with the players.
And that is why it's important that we have what we call this generational mix in the ANC, so that you have various generations who are bringing different skills, different experiences, different knowledge, to be able to make sure that we strike the kind of balance we need, because you can't expect old people to address the needs of young people. Neither can you expect young people to represent the interests of young people. So the coexistence becomes important.
Economic empowerment, we know, was one of the major struggles of South Africa. The youth, majority of who 15 million of them are unemployed. How do you fix that in ensuring that it filters down to them to be able to rise to the levers of power?
I think remember, the problem is systematic and it's historical. So we shouldn't forget that. So that should be the starting point. And therefore, your intervention has to be comprehensive, has to be systematic. And that's why when you look at the ANC manifesto, for instance, we say there's a whole range of things we need to do. One of those is skills development. You have to fix the education system. You have to,
radicalism
for instance,
in the content.
Yes, and you also have to make sure that you grow the economy, because if you don't grow the economy, jobs will not be there. If you don't help young people who are in businesses, promote entrepreneurship, you have to make sure that you use the fourth industrial revolution as well to
we're going to, I'm
integrate
afraid,
young
have
people.
to leave it there. Lebohang Maile is the ANC's head of elections in Gauteng. And of course, South Africans abroad will be voting on the 27th of April, a very significant day for South Africa, Freedom Day. To find out more how the SABC is going to cover that, the SABC's foreign editor, Sophie Mkwena, how are we going to do that?
Well, of course, Tepiso will go around the world to get reports in terms of South Africans living abroad, whether they will definitely go to the voting stations in different parts of the world. For example, we'll start with China, Beijing, move to London. From London, we'll go to Kenya. From Kenya, we'll be in Zimbabwe, Lesotho. Then later on, we'll go to New York, showing Bryce Pease there, giving us reports in terms of South Africans in New York. And we'll also go to Washington. We'll go to Nigeria, we'll go to Tanzania, and we might end up with videos from different parts of the world where South Africans will be voting. And our appeal is that they must send us those videos.
Thank you very much, Sophie Mkwena. That is the SABC's foreign editor. Well, that's it from us here at African Perspective. Thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we find out about the challenges of running a youth movement and its expression. Julius Malema joins us in the studio.